Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 101, Daf Kaf Aleph, page 101a, top of the page with the words Kafra Dude, and then Tan Rabbanan, Hanozin Eitzim, Lacharash, etc. The sediments of dye in the cauldrons, that is, the dyer took the dye remaining in the cauldron from previous use and used that dye for this garment, leading to an inferior result. The sages taught Tosefta 10:8. With regard to one who gives wood to a carpenter to fashion a chair from it, and he fashioned a bench from it instead, or one who gives him wood to fashion a bench, and he fashioned a chair from it instead, Rabbi Meir says, the carpenter gives him the value of his wood and keeps the chair or bench, as he has acquired it due to the change. Rabbi Yehuda says he does not acquire the item. Rather, if the value of the wood's enhancement exceeds the carpenter's expenses, the owner gives the carpenter the expenses, and if the expenses exceed the enhancement of the wood, he gives him the value of the enhancement. Since the carpenter deviated from the customer's order, he is entitled to either his expenses or the enhancement, the smaller amount of the two. The Braita continues, and Rabbi Meir concedes that if he gave wood to a carpenter to fashion a beautiful chair from it, and he fashioned an ugly chair from it, or to fashion a beautiful bench from it, and he fashioned an ugly bench from it, then if the value of the wood's enhancement exceeds the carpenter's expenses, the owner gives the carpenter the value of the expenses, and if the expenses exceed the enhancement, he gives him the value of the enhancement. Since the carpenter did not deviate significantly from the customer's instructions, Rabbi Meir concedes that the carpenter does not acquire the item due to the change. In connection with the discussion of the halakhic implications of the enhancement of the garment quoted above, the Gemara records that a dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the halakha? That the enhancement which dye provides to the wool is substantive, that is, the dye is considered a separate entity from the wool it dyed, or is the halakha that the enhancement which dye provides to the wool is not substantive, that is, that the dye does not remain an independent entity and it is viewed as if there is only colored wool? The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances in which this dilemma is relevant? If we say that the dilemma arises where one robbed another of pigments and ground them up and soaked them in water, converting them into dye, and then dyed wool with them, then the dilemma would be concerning how the robber returns the pigments. In this case, derive the halakha due to the fact that the robber acquired the pigments due to a change of form which occurred when he ground the pigments, and in any event will be obligated to return the value of the pigments at the time of the robbery. The Gemara answers, no, it is necessary to resolve the dilemma in a case where one robbed another of pigments that had already been soaked in water and then dyed wool with them. What is the halacha here? Is the enhancement which dye provides to the wool substantive, that is, a separate entity, so that the owner can say to the robber, give me my dyes that you took? Or perhaps the enhancement which dye provides to the wool is not substantive, but becomes one with the wool, so that the robber can say to the owner, I have nothing at all of yours, since the dyes are no longer considered extant. The Gemara rejects this understanding of the application of the dilemma. The sages say, and even if the enhancement which dye provides to the wool is not substantive, can the robber really say to him, I have nothing at all of yours? Let the owner say to him, give me my dyes that you have caused to be lost. Even if the dyes are no longer considered extant, the owner is still entitled to monetary compensation for the robbery. Rather, the dilemma is relevant to that other side of the question. Is the halacha that the enhancement which dye provides to the wool not substantive, and therefore the robber needs to pay him? Or perhaps the enhancement which dye provides to the wool is substantive, and the robber can say to him, the dyes absorbed into the wool lie before you, take them. The Gemara rejects this as well. Take them? With what should he take the dyes? With soap? While soap does remove dye from the wool, it does not return the dye to the robbery victim, as the dye cannot be removed. The Gemara suggests another scenario. Rather, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where he robbed one person of wool and dyes, and dyed that wool with those dyes, and he is returning the dyed wool to him. The dilemma is the halacha that enhancement which dye provides to the wool is substantive, and he is therefore returning both the dye and the wool to him, or perhaps enhancement which dye provides to the wool is not substantive, and is only the wool that he is returning to him, but he is not returning the dye to him since it is no longer extant. The Gemara rejects this understanding of the application of the dilemma as well. The sages say derive the halacha in this case based on the fact that he increased the value of the wool for him, as dyed wool is more expensive than undyed wool. Consequently, even if the robber has not returned the dye, he reimburses the owner for it when he returns the appreciated wool. The Gemara suggests no, it is necessary to resolve the dilemma in a case where the cost of the dye has depreciated. If the dye is viewed as an independent entity, the robber is returning both the wool and the dye. If it is not, he must reimburse the robbery victim for the value of the dye at the time of the robbery. And if you wish, say instead, the dilemma is relevant in a case where he robbed another of dye and a basket, and dyed the basket with the dye, in which case the dye does not increase the value of the dyed item. The Gemara presents an alternative understanding of the case where the dilemma applies. Ravina said, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where there was wool that belonged to one person and dyes that belonged to one other person, and a monkey came and dyed that wool with those dyes. The dilemma is as follows. Is the halacha that enhancement which dye provides to the wool substantive, so that the owner of the dye can say to the owner of the wool, give me my dyes that are with you? Or perhaps enhancement which dye provides to the wool is not substantive, and the owner of the wool can say to the owner of the dye, there is nothing of yours with me. He is exempt from liability because the dyes are no longer extant. Having determined the scenario in which the dilemma is relevant, the Gemara proceeds to resolve the dilemma. Come and hear a solution from a Mishnah. Orla 3:1. A garment that one dyed with dye extracted from peels of orla, that is fruit that grows on a tree during its first 3 years, must be burned, as it is prohibited to derive benefit from orla. Apparently, the enhancement of an item's appearance is considered a significant matter, and the dye therefore remains an independent substance even after having been absorbed by the wool. The Gemara rejects this resolution. Rava said, The reason the garment must be burned is not because the dye remains an independent substance. Rather, it is because the Torah prohibited benefit that is visible to the eye, as it is taught in a Braita. The verse states, "And shall have planted all manner of trees for food, then you shall count the fruit thereof as forbidden. 3 years shall it be as forbidden." Arelim lo ya'achel. Forbidden to you. It shall not be eaten. Leviticus 19:23. From this verse I have derived only a prohibition against eating it. From where is it derived that one may not even derive benefit from it, and that one may not dye it with dyes extracted from the fruit, and that one may not light a lamp with the oil extracted from the fruit? The Braita answers, the verse states, "Then you shall count the fruit thereof, orlato, ve'araltem orlato et purio, as forbidden. 3 years shall it be as forbidden to you. It shall not be eaten." Leviticus 19:23, to include all these types of benefit in the prohibition. Consequently, there is an explicit derivation of an item dyed with orla dye is forbidden. The Gemara attempts another resolution of the dilemma. Come in here a resolution from that which was taught in a Braita. A garment that one dyed with dye extracted from the peels of produce from the sabbatical year must be burned when the time for the elimination of sabbatical year produce arrives. This indicates that the dye evidently remains an independent substance. The Gemara rejects this proof. It is different there, as the verse states, "shall all the increase thereof be," Leviticus 25:7, and the phrase "shall be" teaches that it will always remain as it is. That is, it retains its status as sabbatical year produce despite any change to its form.